If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, well we're back and I think this is episode 11 and there are many more to come, so let's not worry about that. And we have General Bornman with us, the officer commanding Special Forces Brigade. He's a really interesting man. I really enjoy talking to him. Sir, thank you for being here again. We're taking a lot of your hours, but I think it was worth it. Everyone, I'm sure we can learn so much from you. Thank you, sir. And today, this episode, we're talking, after you were a battalion commander, you were promoted and you became a senior staff officer, operations in Sector 10. I wonder if you can tell us about that, sir.
Yeah, the custom in the operational area, Sector 10, was the commander of 5-4 Battalion after his year, because he wasn't at home. His family stayed in Oshakati. He became the staff officer grade 1 of operations in Oshakati itself. Now, this task was there to control operations for the commander, the commander brigadier of Sector 10, and to use all the staff functions regarding operations. Now, first of all, in this operations room, where the ops officer sat, was a big map of our whole area of responsibility and various other maps to show you adjacent areas, as well as the most northern parts of Angola and the southern parts of Namibia, to get an overall picture. Because some of these operations went into those areas. In this operations room was a desk where a lieutenant ops officer was situated. They worked in 12-hour shifts, and he was in radio communication with the signals unit going to the battalions. In other words, he could speak to each battalion from his office. Obviously, also a telephone link to the outside world, should anybody want to phone there, normal telecom situations. And then next to us was the Air Force operations room. And it wasn't necessary to phone them because they were just next door to us. Now, early mornings, the SO1 Ops had to go to the Ops room and prepare the briefing map in the briefing room for the commander for the 8 o'clock briefing that we normally had, where the police and all the other staff members got together, as well as the Special Forces element, Kufut, and the Southwest African Police, and all the applicable staff officers, personnel, especially logistics. They played a very important role, and of course the Air Force. Just now I'll speak a little bit about the Air Force operations. Then in the day, the ops officer must convey orders as the battle goes on from the officer commanding the brigadier to the various units, certain instructions that go through by means of telex, or if it's emergent, by radio and then followed up by telex. Furthermore, we were there to oversee contact reports, mine reports, and CASEVAC reports, and coordinate the CASEVAC reports with the Air Force just next door. The Air Force HQ, where Air Force colonel was in the post, was, as I said, next to us, but they had direct links to the Air Force base commander in Ondangwa for helicopters or fixed wings or whatever the case could be to be deployed of the Air Force. we coordinated as the SO1 Ops with the Air Force on a daily basis, which Air Force tasks has got to be done tomorrow. There was also a logistical officer, normally a major, and we coordinated all the logistical movements so that we could put movements together, as well as a personnel officer for personnel movements to place personnel to certain units and get them back, or people that had to go back to South Africa and these things. It was a constant job throughout the day, and later that afternoon, you started preparing the situation report that had to go to Windhoek and to Pretoria. That's quite a lengthy document. And late at night, the SITREP went through for the following morning for Pretoria, the Chief of the Army to look at it, and in Windhoek, the General Officer Commanding of Southwest Africa then, to look at the situation report. A lot of paperwork, a lot of overseeing work, and a lot of planning went into this. The Officer Commanding normally gives an instruction that we've got to perform a certain task, and then as Staff Officer Operations, you sit and you work out the various tasks. Coming back to the South African Air Force, they were autonomous with their operations that they did, and interdiction operations in deep in Angola, but we coordinated that with them, and in the morning briefing, those operations were coordinated. And I must tell you that these operations by the Air Force helped us a lot, because dark moon or full moon operations by the Impalas, we stopped the logistical support of SWAPO coming down south from the central parts of Angola. And they hampered the logistical routes. And then, of course, the helicopters giving, first of all, fire support, close fire support during contacts, and the evacuation of casualties. A casualty should go from the position either in Angola or Namibia right to Ondangwa. There was a triage area where the medical personnel, there was a doctor, and they looked at the patient and decided whether you must go to Oshakati, where there was an operating room, and always a surgeon and an anesthetist was available to operate 24/7. They were normally citizen force people that were called up for 3 weeks at a time, leaving their practices in South Africa, coming up to the operational area to perform these duties. We had some fantastic guys, fantastic doctors in that area. And this was the day-to-day running of the mill. It's a busy job. I'm telling you, you don't have time for yourself. Early morning, late evening, and then in the evening, the ops officer used to phone you. There was a contact here, and this happened. Then you just go and you attend to these things. I had a motorbike there, a 49cc Yamaha, which I picked up somewhere, the spoils of war. But in any case, that was my vehicle. My house wasn't very far from the ops room. And I normally left home 4:30 in the morning. And some mornings, this thing didn't want to start. And then people, because it made quite a noise, I don't think the exhausters were fitted correctly. And then the guys used to row with me and said, yeah, you didn't get up early this morning. You overslept, or you walked home from home to the ops room. But that was just a general joke there with this notorious motorbike of mine. I learned a lot during this period, and that the Army College, during the Staff College training, we learned how to conduct in a planning cycle. And now it was in practice and it became second nature to me. And that was wonderful. And it was really in my career, it helped me tremendously to get that experience. I'd like to tell you about one operation. It was Operation Super. Now remember, if I just talk about SWAPO quickly, I've got the greatest respect for these SWAPO cadres and insurgents. They were good soldiers. They were not afraid to get into a firefight. And they stood their ground. They were not cowards. They were not runaway soldiers. And I respect them for that. But their strategy was to deploy the South African Defence Force on the whole border of Southwest Africa to Angola, starting from the Caprivi right to the Cocoveld. In the Caprivi, they didn't succeed because the language of the people was a problem. The people in the Caprivi, as you should know, didn't speak Ovambo. They spoke Lozi and other Namibian dialects, and predominantly English. And that area was closed due to the good work of he became a general, Aka de Jager, and he mopped up the whole problems of SWAPO in the Zambian and southern Angola area. He did a very good job there in the Caprivi. I don't know whether you perhaps met him or knew of him. A good guy. Then they moved to the Kavango area. The same problem with the languages. They were still there and having an influence in the area, but operations at a very, very low intensity in the Kavango and the Caprivi. And now they were in Ovamboland, where they could speak the language. They came from Ovamboland. It was their territory. And they wanted to broaden their front to the Cocoveld. Before Operation Super, they were there, but a very few incursions into that area. It's a mountainous area. It's a very difficult area across the Kunene River. And it was a difficult area for us to counter the counterinsurgents. But they decided to put in a large force north of the operational area of the Cocoveld to our extreme west of the Ruacana Falls. Now, we received intelligence of this build-up. And now I'm going to talk Army politics again. What happened in the ops room. Our commander then, Brigadier Barnos, wasn't very happy about this situation. He said, that's not our problem. It's the problem of the people in Windhoek. But the intelligence came and the intelligence was getting hotter and hotter. And we put in a reconnaissance team of special forces. And they laid a mine there in that area. The SWAPO people detonated the mine. And we knew that they were definitely there and they were moving from north to south to replenish and to establish a firm base in that area. Now, the Brigadier was very cross with us and with the senior staff officer, Colonel Hubert. And he said to us, yeah, but you didn't listen to me and you sent in the reconnaissance people. We briefed him thoroughly. And he was very cross with us. And he left and he said, we must just carry on. He was annoyed with us. And I went into Colonel Hubert's office. I said, Colonel, listen, we must do something about this operation. And we sat there and we did a plan. We got the logistical people in and the personnel, the medical people, and of course the Air Force, the first to call. and we worked out a basic plan. And now it's about 8 o'clock in the evening. Now I said to him, now we must go to the Brigadier's house. We must tell him about this because time is running out. Okay, we got in the car. And remember, there's no bad blood between the Brigadier and his colonel and myself. And as we get to his house, I knock on the door and I tell the colonel, okay, you can go first. He says, no, you go first in case there's a fight. Then you must get, which wouldn't happen. And the Brigadier was there. He wasn't asleep yet. And we said to him, Brigadier, we must go and speak. There's a big problem. The build-up is right there. And he looked at us and he started smiling. He said, okay, go to my office. Get all the, I said, the people are waiting already. And we got there and we worked out this plan. And Operation Super, I wasn't involved directly in the operation, but just in the planning, was a great success. And there we stopped the infiltration to the Kokerveld so that we could concentrate in the South African effort just on the 4 battalions that we had. So when they talk about Operation Super, but something strange also happened there. The Air Force were waiting at the Marienfluss. It's a desert type of terrain in Namibia. It looks like a big beach, white sands. And that was the helicopter admin area that we had for Operation Super. But in the meantime, while waiting for instructions and troop deployments, the Air Force decided to go to the sea. We're going fishing at Rocky Point. That's on the west coast. They got in the choppers and they went there. I don't know whether they caught some fish, but they were there. They came back and they said, when we started now with the finals of the operation, they said, sorry, we haven't got enough fuel. I said, but you had enough fuel. And then the story came out. I said, okay, we'll speak later. And I went to the log guys, and that was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The next morning, we had to deploy. And of course, believe me, that morning, 6 o'clock, 2 C-130s with enough fuel dropped by means of parachute the fuel in the Marienfluss, and the choppers could fly. I felt so proud for our logistical people. And my friend, Gerard Cornelius, later became a Brigadier General in the logistical field. Till today, I'm very thankful for the arrangements that he made. And remember, Pretoria is very, very, very far from the Marienfluss. At 6 o'clock that morning, the parachutes deployed of the cargo parachutes, and the fuel was ready for the Air Force to fly. Nothing came of the Marienfluss trip to the sea because the operation was a big success. So bygones are bygones. It was a very successful operation. And one of the prime operations that we could use in the operational area of all times. In my period, as I was there for 2 years, later a friend of mine, Barak van Heeren, became the SO1 Ops internal operations, and I only focused on external operations. Special Forces operations, as well as our operations and the deployment of 3-2 Battalion, and all these big operations that took place in that period. I learned a lot as a staff officer, and it was really great. It was a great year, 2 years in that position, and I was surrounded by very good people that supported the whole effort, and we worked like a team. I can embroider on all operations, but I don't think that is the aim of our exercise. I just want to say something that SWAPO didn't play the game. once the political boundaries were drawn, and we had to be confined to bases, they skipped that. Luckily, we had early warning. We had people in Luanda that saw the build, and a lot of people and a lot of intelligence came to us that they are busy, and we could remuster, and we could regroup again, waiting for this onslaught of theirs, and we could bear it off. I'm proud to say that the South African Army, which I formed a very small part of, was a great army, prepared for anything. And the big onslaught that came from SWAPO, assisted by the Cubans and the FAPLA people. I'm very proud today to refer to these operations. As I'm sure you've got some questions on this situation, because I gladly would like to answer them.
Yes, thank you, sir. I do have a lot of questions, as always. I must just say it's raining quite hard out here, so if there's a disturbance, don't blame me. Can't stop the weather. Before you become a senior officer like this, would you go through a security clearance?
Oh yes, if you go on the staff course, you must have a security clearance for what is uiters geheim in English. Top secret. Top secret. Sorry for the moment. Yeah. Top secret. Because I must tell you one thing. While I was adjutant, I still had a secret clearing. I didn't have a top secret clearing. They were in the cabinet. There were a few files top secret. One evening, nobody was there. I opened the safe and I looked into these top secret. You know what? There was one page in the top secret file saying everybody going to the operational area must beware of cholera. And I thought, if that's now secrets, I can hold it. I can hold it.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I opened the top secret file, and this was a little thingy with got you.
Got you.
Got you. There was nothing else in it, so I was okay. Well, but I suppose it's necessary. So I mean,
no,
at
absolutely.
that level, you see everything.
No.
Everything.
No, everything that we worked there was secret and top secret. I mean, special force operations and coming operations, top secret.
I once spoke to. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
No. Please carry on.
I once spoke to a Spetsnaz officer, the Russian special forces.
Yeah, the Russian.
And they very good. And so he said to me that the first target was actually not the commanding generals. They could be replaced. They would go for the top staff officers. They could kill them in a first strike where they think they would achieve more. What do you think of such a strategy, sir? Because they think staff officers are, sitting in a base, very safe, nothing.
No, that is very true. I mean, staff officer operations could be replaced. In that lieutenant sitting there, after 2-3 months, he's a capable little man, working with all these things. In an emergency, he could carry on. But that is very true, especially if you do strategical planning and you take the staff officers away. And especially the team of staff officers. Like I explained, the logistics, the personnel, ops, and of course, intelligence. And then the Air Force and the medics. That's a team that you can't break because they've got to do the staff planning. The commander is busy with strategical things and the political squeals that we had. And he had to fight off those things. That was his job. We had to do the slog work and present the plan to him according to the guidelines that came from the commander. No, I agree. The Russians are right in that sense, but it's a temporary thing. Staff officers, good staff officers, can be replaced immediately.
In Easter Reserve, there was a meeting between Stalin, the Soviet commander, Churchill, and Roosevelt. And then Stalin, they're still not sure if he made a joke or not, said they should execute every single German staff officer which they could find. This was really at the end of the war, the Second World War. And Roosevelt, would you believe, agreed. Again, these people say now he was just agreeing, just playing along, he would never have done it. Churchill got so angry that he walked out of a meeting. He was that angry. He said they will never ever do such a thing. These men, once they become prisoners of war, will be treated like prisoners of war. You cannot wipe out the entire staff corps of a German army, even if it's a Nazi army. So what it says to me is that if Stalin was thinking in that way, in that direction, then they certainly realized the value of a staff officer.
Absolutely. Talking of the German staff officers and the Second World War, they were very good. But their problem was Hitler. Not understanding the chain of command, not understanding the planning cycle, and getting emotional about things. He was the biggest problem to the staff officers, and he reigned with fear because he executed how many generals, good generals. Well, at that stage, Stalin didn't have much work because Hitler did it for him. He executed his generals. If they didn't follow suit, it was a problem.
That's very true, sir. You know, he was a corporal who got lucky, and I've got nothing against the corporal, but it takes something else to command an army.
Precisely.
You can't do it from that level and jump up to here. Who was it, sir, who said it took 20 years to get 20 years experience?
General Meyron.
Yeah, George Meyron.
George Meyron. Yeah,
very
he
good
said,
soldier.
Excellent guy.
I know that von Manstein, the German field marshal, almost came to blows with Hitler because of this type of thing. And yeah, so anyway.
Well, look at Rommel. He was part of the
Yes, he was
pact
murdered.
to get rid of Hitler, and he had to swallow a cyanide pill. And the next day he got a honorable funeral, military funeral.
That's right. And Rommel, for those who don't remember, was probably more popular under the British Army as well than their own officers. He was just a fantastic human being. There were nothing about Rommel which could be said as war crimes or anything. He was just an honorable officer, a very, very good one.
And an example to follow.
Absolutely, even to today. But I must ask you, so was it by chance that the Air Force had their place right next to yours, next to the Army?
No, it's practice. Because we've got to work, because we couldn't wage that war without the Air Force. Look, they had their direct line through to Air Force Headquarters, Chief of the Air Force. From there, they had their autonomous operations that they did. But we were always linked in that, and they would obviously told about all our operations. No, we had to work together like a good marriage, really. We had some good Air Force officers in my time that worked there as colonels, and then the officer commanding of the Air Force base was a lieutenant colonel. All good guys. They could operate. They understood the bush war, really. And then, of course, our chopper pilots and our Impala pilots and the other aircraft pilots. Excellent. The best that you can get.
There might be people here who don't understand the geographical area. So perhaps, can you tell me, just plus minus, I don't know myself actually, but it's a long way. From where the Caprivi ends all the way down to the Atlantic Ocean. That must be what, 1,500 kilos?
If not more, of course.
If not more.
Yeah. It's from, if you take the southern, the central part of the southern African continent, It's over halfway where the Caprivi Strip is. That's right next to the Victoria waterfalls, right to the sea in the west. And you know what?
It's almost half across the continent.
Yeah.
So
You
that's
know,
where they wanted to stretch the troops into. They wanted the South Africans
That's
to
right.
deploy all
That's
the
right.
way to stretch you too thin, I suppose.
Precisely. To get you on an extended line and to stretch your lines of communication and supply. And as I said, luckily in the Caprivi, they did their operations very well into Zambia. And the local population, I told you the story. And the same in the Kavango.
Yes, I
luckily,
understand the Caprivi people, they still want independence.
Yeah,
they
still
don't
want
really consider
independence.
themselves to be part of Namibia.
Because that border,
just,
that border was an artificial border. It's not a natural border, not dividing people. In Africa, you find this. In the Wambuland, a lot of the people stay across in Angola. We made a temporary border there and an artificial, artificial border. The same in South Africa. The Venda people, 2% of Zimbabwe's population is Venda speaking, and the other 98% stays in South Africa in the old Venda area. So you know, the colonial lines were drawn that suited the colonial powers, and if you look at the people in the Caprivi, their ancestors and their family is in Zambia still today. Now, is this guy crossing a border, causing international incident, must he be arrested, visiting his family, that we as colonials came in? And you know, of course, what is a very interesting thing? Our operations that started in 1966 wasn't the first time that we went into Ovambo. In 1914, the Union of South Africa also went in there, and they tried to subject the Ovambo people because they needed the people for the mines, and they killed the chief, Mandume. They killed him. He's buried just north of the Angolan border. It's not the first time that we go there and try to subject the Ovambo people with this situation. If you look at history, it's the second time that we went in there. Okay, the second time was a different story. They were operating from Angola to come in to get independence by means of weapons and landmines and blowing up bridges and these tactics. But this makes Africa a very interesting place to stay.
Yes, because the border isn't necessarily the border in their heads.
No?
You know, so I read the story once. I don't know if it's true. If it's not, forgive me. But when they built the Kariba Dam in Rhodesia, this thing, of course, was built and it flooded a whole bunch of areas behind it.
Yeah,
and they say to this very day, and this is now what, 60, 70 years later, the elephants are still walking the same trails they would have walked, but now they're swimming.
That's true, of course.
Is that true, sir?
It's true. And you know, interesting thing, the road workers had to make a road from Karoi. There were normal secondary roads up to the town of Karoi, that is east of Kariba. And they had to make a road through very thick bush and hilly country to where the Kariba Dam is supposed to be in the Zambezi River. And they struggled. And you know what they did? They took the routes the elephants used to walk from that area to the river, the Zambezi River. The road from Karoi to right up to the Kariba Dam is the old elephant trail. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no,
fascinating.
we with our colonial shenanigans, we caused a lot of problems. You know, another thing that I learned in Namibia, especially to the west, the Rokana area, but most definitely in the Messina area with Zimbabwe to the north, and us to the south, with the Limpopo River being the border. The river draws people together. It doesn't divide people. It draws people together because there's water, there's food, there's good vegetation, there's fish to be eaten, there's water animals that you can, like hippos, that you can hunt and use the meat. A river draws people together, it doesn't divide people. And this is
It's
what
a
the
training. It's they can trade there as well, and it's a
precisely.
So,
well, the Arabs, if you look at the settlement at Mapambukwe, the Arabs traded from Mozambique, from Shai, because the Limpopo River at that stage was very broad. And it was navigable for the dulls of the Arabs. They traded with the people of Mapambukwe. Slave trade, yes, and gold, and all sorts of commodities that they could trade from the people of Mapambukwe and the people of Zimbabwe. Now today, with various factors, geological and human factors, the river is boxed in, and it is not navigable in the dry season.
yeah, Shai is in Mozambique.
Mozambique, that's where the Limpopo River.
Berlin.
That's right. That's where the Limpopo River mounts into the Indian Ocean.
That's right. And it's quite broad, even if you say no, it's not as
there is very
but
broad,
quite,
but
yeah,
further west, if it's in flood, yes, you can try and do it, but you're going to go upstream. Downstream is going to be lovely.
I know Mozambique. Do you know there's a Voortrekker statue in
Yes, Lutrichard, yes. They went up there to avoid the English and to get a pass through to the harbor there to export their goods.
That's right.
Yeah,
to get away from the Cape.
That's right. That's correct. Yeah, no. Our pioneers went in there, but tsetse fly and malaria mowed them down.
I've heard about the lost Afrikaner tribe in southern Angola, sir, of the Dorsland trekkers. Have you people ever met them? Is this true?
Yes, it's very true. And there's a person, he's the director of Protea Bookhouse, Nicole Stassen. He wrote a doctorate on this. It's a fantastic book to read. How the pioneers that, and it was religious motivated people, went into Angola, stayed there and came back. In the Tosha Game Park, there's still some monuments where they, from there, went into Angola. A lot of them came back and they landed in Namibia as farmers. In the early years, operating from Runtu, just across the river at Kulai, there was an old Mrs. van der Merwe, who still could speak Afrikaans, but she's from the descendants of the Dorsland trekkers of that area. Some of the black people at Umapapa in Angola can still speak Afrikaans, and they still belong to the Reformed Church of South Africa. They were Christianed by the Dorsland trekkers in that area. A guy called, he was a Portuguese officer, Lieutenant Pereira Desch. He was a well-known officer for Portugal in the time of the Dorsland trek. He married an Afrikaner lady. Her surname was Botha. And in the northern part, central northern part of Angola, is a town named after him, Pereira Desch. No, their tracks are still there. They came out, they became unfriendly with the Portuguese government and the Portuguese people there. And then they came back. But it's a very interesting story. And if you could read that book of Nicol Stassen, it's a big book. It's a very thick book. But really, Nicol did a wonderful work compiling the history of these people.
I will certainly try to get hold of it. And I suppose they speak a strange Afrikaans. They would still be speaking the old Afrikaans.
The old Afrikaans. We had the same with the people in Argentina. A lot of people went to Argentina after the Anglo-Boer War. At Comavadero and at Puerto Visser. There's people there that still speak a little bit of Afrikaans, especially the older people. But it's an old Afrikaans, but we understand each other. I met some of them, and it's very interesting speaking to them. And they still know about the Free State and the Transvaal, but the Afrikaans is an ancient Afrikaans. But we can understand each other. But they all speak Spanish. They speak Spanish fluently. And their children obviously are brought up at schools and so forth.
Well, we have to perhaps just explain that after the Boer War ended, the Second Anglo-Boer War, where all the concentration camps was, let's not forget about that. Every burgher, every captured soldier had to take an oath of allegiance to the Queen or to the King. She was already dead, Queen Victoria. But they had to take an oath of allegiance to the new dispensation. And many of them flatly refused. And because they refused, they were not allowed in any of the British Empire. And therefore they had to go. And that's when some of them went into Angola, which was Portuguese at that time. Some went to Argentine, US. A lot of them went there as well, as long as they didn't have to take the oath. I think I'm right when I say that. So that's
no. That's the main reason. They didn't want to subject under British rule.
And it did cause a lot of problems because when in 1914, when the First World War broke out, the Union of South Africa was already there. And that's where the rebellion comes from, which we were speaking about here before in the other episode, because they simply didn't feel like fighting for the Brits. And then in the Second World War, same story. And then they had to take the Red Oath, which also caused all sorts of problems. I wonder if you know about the Red Oath, sir. Was it still a factor in the army when you joined?
No, not at all. But in the Second World War, if you signed the Red Oath on your lapel, you wore a red bar to show that you signed the Red Oath. And you know, in the church, the Dutch Reformed Church, the people went to church, they were chased out of the church because they signed the oath to the Brits. Regarding these parts of history, there's two very good books written by Louis, what's his name, the book? Louis Bornman. How to Catch a Boer. This is the story about the rebellion and then the rebel track, the rebel spoor. He did a thorough study on this 1914 rebellion and the fighting against the Ovambo people and killing of Mandume, their supreme chief. And the intelligence officer at that stage in 1914 was a Springbok rugby player called Cocky Haan. He was quite notorious. And then the rebels of the Northern Cape that fought against the people, and General Mani Maritz. It's a very interesting part of our history. And really, I can promote these two books of Louis Bornman. He was also a 3-2 battalion lieutenant. He's got a doctorate in economics, but he's actually an excellent historian. With his military background, he understood the causes and the situation of the rebellion.
Yeah, we can
Excellent.
get hold of a covers, we'll put it here that people can go and buy them. I think that's also the time when General De La Rey got shot at the police.
Yes, at that same time.
But it wasn't on purpose. They were not out to murder him, I must say that.
No.
It was a sad thing which happened to Chris De La
Because
Rey.
at that stage there was a criminal gang, the Foster gang,
That's right.
and the police were after them and every police station and were warned about this gang, and the driver of General Beyers and General Koos De La Rey didn't stop at the roadblocks. They thought the people were after them. It was a very bad time in our Afrikaans history. And then the policeman fired a shot because he refused to stop at the roadblock.
Yes, your friend Brigadier Heymans of the police told me that actually the commanding officer of that roadblock then killed himself. I was speaking on a correction, but he might have.
No, he committed suicide.
Yes, he felt that bad about the incident because Chris De La Rey was the hero.
Absolutely a hero, and he tried to get the Boers after the war to reconcile. He went over to Britain, and he came back, and he was really trying to pick up all the loose ends. A great leader, absolutely a great leader with General Beyers. And General Beyers also died. Yeah, the lion of the Western Transvaal.
Well, that's interesting. So, you know, the Afrikaners, my wife always say that we are probably the most violent people she's ever seen in her life. She might be right, but we don't fight without a cause. I want to say that as well. And I think we have a very, very rich history, and it's a pity that not more people know about it. So I'm glad that we're speaking about it. But let me get back to Wambuland before we get nasty letters from people. Not that we care. Where was the Navy, sir? Why did the Navy not have also a room right next to the Air Force and the Army?
Okay, the sea was too far. I'm joking, Koos. In the operations in Wambuland in Namibia, the Navy had a part to play. They sent up their Marines. They did the normal infantry training at the infantry school at Oshawelu, and they used to guard Oshakati and Ondangwa and escort duties all along the road. They were good guys. There was always a lieutenant commander in charge of the group that was there, and they really operated without any problems. I looked after them. They were good people, and it was a good experience for them being Marines of the Navy. Obviously, when it came to Special Forces operations and operations deeper in Angola, the Navy played an extreme important role. But naval officers were not involved in the Wambuland operations.
No, that's once again, some people might not understand the geographical area, but that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, it's very far from the sea.
Hoping you would explain to us. And there was never really a threat from the sea. I mean, it's not that
no, not at all.
The other side didn't really have a Navy to come over.
No.
That brings me to something. So how did they cross the river? Because we're talking about a major river here, Zambezi and Kavango River. Major rivers, full of crocodiles, hippos.
And then the Kunene River.
Kunene, yes, Kunene too.
They lost. The Kunene River was a problem for them. They crossed it, and various SWAPO insurgents died there, drowning, and crocodiles, of course. You know, we've got two Van Riebeeck brothers. They were top-class, world-class canoeists. In the late 50s, early 60s, they traveled from Kahama to Ruakana on their canoes. It was still very low intensity there. Obviously, they had a backup team along the river and so forth. But those two brothers were attacked by crocodiles and hippos 25 times in the 2 weeks that they canoed down the Kunini River. Obviously, in Wombeland, going further west from the Kunini River, there was no rivers. Smaller tributaries and so forth, but not a problem. The Kamanga River, of course, was a problem. And then in the Caprivi, you had the Zambezi River, the same problem. The biggest threat was crocodiles. They had rubber dinghies and boats, but it was only on a few occasions that I could remember that boats were discovered and demolished, obviously, by us. But the river was a threat.
I can tell you a story, sir, because I lived in Katima Mulilo for a short while. My father was posted there. I'm not sure as what. Might have been the magistrate, but it might have been something else. But we were there. And so the army shot a crocodile. It was a huge crocodile. And now all of us were standing there and they were cutting this crocodile, was dead now, open. I don't know why. Perhaps they were trying to skin it. I was a child. So, and the next moment, there falls out of a crocodile's stomach 2 hand grenades, which looked quite rusty. And that's where I saw the Sergeant Major who picks up his wife, who must have been 5 times his weight. And he ran with her, like he would have a sack of mealies. And when he ran, I decided I will run as well. And so I started running, and everybody was running. So I'm sure that the crocodiles were actually catching terrorists as well. I'm not sure that they actually ever got a soldier, meaning from a defense force, but they certainly got hold of a terrorist.
No, there were quite a few guys, not in operations, but going there, 3-2 battalion guys, special forces guys, yeah. And it was all recreational Kazakhs that we had. And some we never saw again. And I'm sure that crocodile with the hand grenades must have had a little bit of a heartburn. But luckily they didn't explode. But I'm sure these hand grenades were guys illegal fishing, throwing it into the river, and there was a misfire. It didn't detonate, perhaps due to the water. I don't know. And then the crocodile saw this little sweetie lying in the bottom of the river and galloping it. But of course, here's one thing that I'm afraid of is crocodiles. Really, you can't see him. You can't see him.
Well, he's quick, sir, because I took a trip with an Alouette, and these pilots were slightly insane. They were good people, but they came low. And they started chasing these crocodiles around to the helicopters. And you know, so that thing is like it runs on its feet. Of course, it runs on its feet, but on its toes. It goes up like this, and then it starts moving, and you will not run away from it. So we had a healthy respect. It got one of our dogs, actually. His name was Captain. And then sadly, the crocodiles got hold of Captain, and that was the last time we saw the poor dog. So they were there. I think the point we're making here is we're talking about Africa. We're talking about a unique soldiering experience, where the animals are as dangerous as the enemy. And then there's the sun, which can burn the hell out of you. And then there's a lack of water, and there's a lot of dust. I'm not sure that we've explained all these conditions to everybody. Did you ever had engines overheating, sir, from the vehicles?
Oh, yes. In this thick sand. In summer, yes. Oh, yes. You had to be very careful. Every hour you had to stop for a cooling stop. It's a problem. And talking of animals, crocodiles are a threat, and as well as Mr. Hippo, a very dangerous thing. And then lion, leopard, elephants, hyena, snakes. Yeah.
I wonder how many stories I've heard about the snake crawling up into a sleeping bag of some poor fellow. Do you think that ever happened, or is it just a rumor?
Man, there's a story of my grandfather in the Anglo-Boer War. One night he slept on a grave at a farm, and he dreamed that his rifle is in his pants, couldn't get it out to shoot. The next morning when he got up, there was this wrinkles, the banded cobra. Well, my grandmother told me this story for the truth. So it is possible, because they also like to be warm. The snake doesn't like cold weather.
And they're quick.
Yeah,
I will tell a story here, which I will see as public interest. I was driving a Casper once, and I was from a flying squad, and of course we don't drive Caspers at 50 kilometers an hour. We went as quick as that thing can go. And there was a fixed rule in the police that we would never put two flying squad members in the same base, because there would be a little bit of a chase or a bit of a competition who's got the quickest vehicle. And this one was really quick because I bribed. Now I asked the Bluebell, the mechanic, to do something to its turbo. So now it was pumping out more than what it normally would do. And so I was in fifth gear, now I'm going like a bat out of hell. And the people are sitting on the roof. And right there, far in front of me, I see like two lines across the dirt road. And I think, okay, it's the speed cops with the traffic police. Are they now here? This is very strange. But I'm glad they're there, because they're not going to arrest me, and I can now measure the speed, because I'm going at least 120 kilometers an hour. There was a fancy man, I would tell you 140, but I don't think that's true. So we just go. And the next moment I see these lines are moving, and it's two black mambas. Then they stretch, not right across the road, but they must have been at least 8 feet. I don't know, very long. And the guys on the back, the black policemen, they start tumbling inside the vehicle, because they saw it as well. They were sitting on the roof. And I think to myself, well, I can't stop. Let's see what happens. Now, a Casper, for those of you who don't know, is a high vehicle. It's standing high. It's higher than my head. I'm about 6 foot, 6'1" with shoes on. And the bonnet is slightly above my head. That's how high that thing is. So where you are sitting is about 8 feet above the ground, at least, perhaps 9 feet. And it was a Mark II Turbo B. And so it had the big windows on the side. It was actually designed to be used in the townships. So I'm driving with this thing. The next moment I see this snake, one of them started off and the other one came up like this. And now it looked like it wants to strike at me. And it's here, just in front of me. And the next moment it goes to the side and it strikes on the window right next to me, the armored window. All right, that window is this thick, it doesn't matter. As I always say to people, if you want to find out what is a hard life, just make your sergeant angry and let him get hold of one of these discarded Casper windows, and you carry that thing around, you will find out how heavy that glass can be. And of course, it strikes you right next to me where my knee would have been if it wasn't for the armor, and I started braking. And by the time I turned around and got back, these snakes are gone, even though we shot about 700 rounds and we didn't hit a single one of them. Now, I've always heard the old people say in Namibia that a snake can get you inside the car even if you're traveling at 80, 90 kilometers an hour, and I thought they were lying. So, my tip for the day, keep your windows closed, put the aircon on. That snake can get you inside the car. I don't know what if you have comments.
No, you've got to be very careful when there's snakes. I've seen that the mamba chased the troops. I've seen that we were gathering wood, and it was a nest of mambas, and that mamba came out, and the troops just took for the heels. No, snakes, crocodiles, and don't forget Mr. Buffalo. Don't mess with him. And even blue wild beasts. Don't mess with nature. Be careful. And unfortunately, where the operations were, it was in this type of environment.
So would you plan for this, sir? I know it's hard because I know that this SW4E, when we wrote this book, he talks about where they attack a bridge, they land with a Huey helicopter, they're working with the Rhodesians right on this bridge. They start running to plant the explosives, and the next moment they start running back. And there's a whole swarm of bees chasing them all the way back to the helicopter. Is it possible that during your planning of the operations that being this so unique in Africa, that your people would figure in somehow that something can go wrong with nature?
Yeah, no, because you've got to work in these things, but you can't predict everything. I mean, you can't predict that swarm of bees unless there was a reconnaissance group that was there that reconnoitered that area. In the military, we talk of friction de guerre, the fog of war. It happens. It happens.
Now I have to ask you, so if you're sitting there in your control room and a pilot is shot down, if an aircraft is lost, what happens?
There's always a group of paratroopers on standby immediately to go out and to recover and to protect the helicopter till it's been recovered, normally by another bigger helicopter. And we go and rescue this guy. They've got and each pilot has got a Pelva beacon. It's a radio that also gives a signal. In other words, aircraft, fixed wing or helicopters flying in that direction. If the guy's not injured and he's away from the aircraft, him and his technical assistant, they can pick them up by this beacon. And then these paratroopers can be para-dropped in the area, secure the guy, help him medically if it's needed, and then wait till another helicopter comes and pick them up. With all the sorties at night time with the Impalas, there's always a C-130 ready with paratroopers. Should any of them get into trouble, he's got to eject or he's shot down to go and rescue the man. No, that was always built. Always. That is one of the main tasks of the paratroopers.
So no, it's not the job of special forces to go and rescue a shot down aircrew.
That can happen, of course. Oh yes, it can happen, depending on where it is. If it's in a enemy infested country, obviously that will be a special forces job. Like we now see with Delta Force rescuing people that were kept hostage by the Somalis. And these scenarios, but no, special forces can go in depending on. But a quick reaction, the first reaction, is our reaction force of the paratroopers on standby. That on Dangwa. That was the rule. With the normal helicopter operations, they were also on standby. Obviously, if they report a mayday, attention will be given immediately to them. A forced landing or a ejection, and you go and look for this guy, and he's got a Pelva beacon to make himself known.
Where does the names come from for all these operations, like Super and whatever? How do you get to the names?
Well, each year we get a list of names. I don't know who's the name maker. You don't know, but you just get a list of names. About 40 names there. And you can choose the area in which the operation is, can choose. It was a bit of a joke. Whenever there's a new operation, we used to call, and the intelligence staff used to keep this list. Then I said, bring us the list. What would you like the name? Daisy, Super, Meerbos, or whatever the case could be. And then that name is chosen as the name for the operation. In all the correspondence, you write as a prefix, Operation Super. Let's take Super as a, it's got nothing to do with the Kavango or anything, and these names are non-committal.
So they mean nothing.
Yeah, it means nothing. Ops carnation. What does a carnation mean? It means nothing. Oops. Operation Septic. Not Operation Skeptic, not Septic. Operation Skeptic. It means nothing. It's just a code name, predetermined, and you can choose which one, and then that becomes, this is Operation Meebos. The aim of the operation is the following. The following forces are deployed. The following air support has been allocated. And this is the medical plan and all that, and you send it up to the higher headquarters. And you carry on with your operation.
Can you tell me, sir, about combined operations or integrated forces? And how far was the South Africans experts at this field?
In our time, it was merely army operations. Later, with of course the political doors being open and peacekeeping operations under the cover of, or the auspice of, the United Nations, there's an overall commander, depending which country he comes from, it doesn't matter. And then each unit of a country is commanded by his own commander. There's an overall commander. Actually, he just coordinates everything. But they stay under command of their own people. Whenever we went in operations with the Air Force and with Kufut and the police elements, they commanded their elements. We just coordinated the situation between the two from the army side. But you retain under your commander, your country's commander, but there's always an overall commander. Look at the Second World War. General Montgomery, we spoke of him the other day. He was in charge of South Africans, Canadians, New Zealanders, and all these countries. But they retained under command of their own commanders. We call that command and control.
I was about to ask you about that, so the command lines in an operation like Super.
Operation Super, the Brigadier of Sector 10 was in charge. He was in command. Let's use the military term. He was in command of the whole operation, supported by the Air Force. And his superior was Chief of the Army, and of course, Chief of the Namibian Forces. There was a split in command, but we always double inform Chief of the Army and General Officer Commanding South African Forces. And that's the chain of command. Then Chief of the Defense Force and the State President, and so forth.
So it's actually very short.
Very short. No, you can't have a long chain of command. Otherwise, you have a problem. I mean, you've got to go up right to the top and wait for the top to come down to you.
And how does it go downwards, sir? How does it go down to a troop?
By means of telex, radio messages, text messages, and even telephone.
I'm trying to imagine this. If you've planned Operation Super, Op Super, who will do the briefing for the people who's actually going to participate, who has to go and do it? The commander, in that case, Brigadier Barnos, he briefed the various commanders going in. 3-2 Battalion, the Air Force guys were there and everybody, and the order group was held. He briefed them and they went in. Obviously, they briefed their troops. It was mainly an Air Force and 3-2 Battalion and Special Forces operation. He briefed those three officers, and they briefed their troops and they went in. And they reported back to us in the ops room. And we obviously briefed the Brigadier, and he and as staff officer, you prepared all the information and the whole sitrep about the operation to the higher headquarters. You didn't bother them with nitty-gritty stuff.
In actual fact, what can they do? They can't, with all due respects, from Windhoek or Pretoria, tell you no, rather go to the left flank. They're not there. They're not there. They don't understand it. They're not in the position.
At what time, sir, do you feel during such a briefing that the men now fully understand what needs to be done?
Once they've received their orders from their various commanders, then they understand. And this is where we learned a lesson from old Monty. He sent his staff officers down to the lowest troop to ask him, what are you going to do? What's your job? How do you see this? What's our objectives and this type of thing? But there wasn't time for that. During Operation Super, we couldn't do that. That was impossible.
Now, obviously, you would be looking at enemy forces as well.
Oh, yeah.
Now, can you tell me about the Cubans, sir? How far did they actually feature in your planning?
There were 3 stages of the Cubans. During Operation Savannah in 1975, we met with them on the front line. That was the initial contact that we had with Cubans. Secondly, during operations, you never saw the Cubans. I'm talking about operations in the southern part of Angola. You never saw them actually in contacts in the field. They were in bases like Kahama, which is higher up north, and these places. They had advisors down south, but very, very rare occasions we met with them, even Russians and so on. With Operation Protea, we got the Russians, but they were support personnel. They were just a little bit late to be warned. That's why we could catch them. All these guys were running up north. Then that was the second phase with the Cubans. Then the third phase was when they flew and they killed 10 troops at Kalwek at the dam. One of their bombs from the aircraft attacked a buffalo. 10 troops were dead. It was a lucky shot, but okay, that happened. And then we retaliated, and there were quite a lot of casualties then. And that's the second phase. The third phase was when the monitoring position started. When the political talks were done, and they had to monitor the border for border violations. We couldn't go into Angola, and they couldn't come down. SWAPO couldn't come down through the border to South Africa. I can tell you a very interesting story. I was the task force commander in the West, operating from Rokana. And we had these monitoring positions. And once a week, we had people from 3-2 at every beacon, 10 kilometers apart from each other. And then there were FAPLA people on the other side. And the Cubans were also there, and they came and we met the Cubans. There was a joint monitoring commission that discussed things with the Cubans and the FAPLA people. That was not my task. My task was to look after the monitoring position. And then normally on a Wednesday, we went and we met all the positions, and the Cubans were there. They flew in their helicopters, we flew in our helicopters. But at the monitoring position, we all get together and we normally have talks. If there were violations, there were refugees or whatever the case could be. At first, I took my doctor with. And when we stopped, he asked the guys, are you all right? Yeah, I've got a headache. And he gave them tablets, and the FAPLA guys heard of this. Yeah, my toe is sore, and the doctor helped them and all that. Fine, everything fine. We went through. The next time, we got there, the doctor was here, but their doctor was also there. The Cuban doctor, because I'm keeping up with the Joneses. His first question to me is, do you know Christian Barnard? I said, yes, I don't know him personally, but I know everything about him. What do you want to know? And he spoke very highly of this, the heart transplant and all these things. Well, I didn't know how to transplant the heart, but I could tell him the history about it. He was very impressed with that. Okay, then they had the doctor. Then I thought, I'm going to pull a trick on you guys, and I brought my chaplain with. And they couldn't follow suit. They didn't have a chaplain. The chaplain went to our guys. He went up to the Fapa guys. They were also religious, predominantly Roman Catholic. He gave them Bibles, and he read out of the Bible, and he prayed for them. And there's no problem with the Fapa guys, but the Cubans, they didn't like it, but they didn't have a chaplain. So that part of the war, we definitely won.
Yeah,
Interesting
well,
guys.
You're not supposed to have a chaplain. You can bring the commissar.
Yeah, no. But yeah, later I was also introduced into the talks with certain problem areas. I met the Cubans, and the first morning that I met Colonel Suri of the Cubans at the border, and he had an interpreter, Mike Ferrello, but I prepared a speech in Spanish, very short, and it took me quite a while because one of our interpreters helped me with this. And I greeted him and I said, "How are you?" in Spanish. And no, it's fine. And okay, I'm the commander here. If there's a problem, you work through the Monitor Commission. And thank you very much. He said, "Do I want some coffee?" They had a flask full of cold black coffee, nice strong. I enjoyed it, and he gave me 2 bottles of Cuban rum. And I said goodbye to Colonel Suri. And the interpreter was standing one side, and they thought that I could speak Spanish fluently. I couldn't. You must practice. You must really practice this. But that little speech helped a lot. And one day, it was in the cocoa field. This was an interesting story, and this is why Africa is so important. Now, in that area, the Himba people, these are the people that paint themselves with a red ochre. And they cure their skins with rotten milk. They don't use underarm deodorant. But in any case, they're good people. Natural people down to the ground. And we were there, and as the devil wanted it. And in this group were 2 Americans, obviously CIA guys were sent there with permission. Nothing hoo-ha. Air Force guy and mechanized infantry guy. And the Fapa guys were there, and the Cubans were there. And this is a very big border violation, because the headman from this side sent these 3 guards of his over the river to go and speak to the family members there, to invite them to a wedding. Now, these 3 guys are sitting there with their G3 rifles, as old as hell. And now this is a big, I said, no, let's just find out what's the story. Now, the Himba speak Herero. And I got hold of a Herero sergeant there that could speak Afrikaans. Now I'm in the position to manipulate this whole situation. Now I ask a question in Afrikaans to this guy. Why did they go across? Then he speaks in Herero to them. They tell him. Then he answers to me in Afrikaans. Now I translate in English. They went over to invite people to come to a wedding. They are the guards of the headman, and he stays there and there. Then the Fapla guy goes into Portuguese, and the Cuban interpreter goes into this. And then there are various questions from the Cubans. There were about 5 officers there, and from the Fapla guys, and from the Americans. But I did a very good translation. They were all very happy. And the 3 were set free. And I said to them, you must just remember, this is Africa. We, and again, coming to the river, we drew these lines. The colonial people, the Portuguese and the Germans and whoever, the British, you can blame anybody. But the fellow, it's not a military violation. This is the civilians. Yeah, but the weapons and, okay, the problem was solved right there. Otherwise, it would have been a story from Havana, from Luanda, via Pretoria coming onto us. Luckily, it was worth the while. Yeah, we had an interesting life.
How well did the Cubans actually do? Because according to themselves, if you read their books, they were fantastic heroes. They won every battle. And of course, I'm
Can I
being
answer?
sarcastic. Yes, please answer me.
Can I answer your question with one word? Propaganda.
Yeah,
That's the,
yeah, they were not rated highly.
no.
Well, I've never met a South African soldier who actually rated them higher than almost nothing. But okay, they were there, I suppose. Is there
And you
anything?
know,
Yeah.
once we met them, we realized they're human beings like us. Obviously coming from Cuba, and then the guy holds out a photo of his wife and children. You have a photo of your wife and children, you show it to him, and you start talking. And yeah, it was better speaking to them than to fight against them. But the word propaganda explains the whole situation. And everybody that was there were not the fighting guys. It was the political guys that were sent, except for Colonel Suri. But after that, we didn't see him again. He was back in Kahama, looking after the so-called operations.
Is there anything, sir, which I left out in this discussion?
No, of course, I think we've discussed it in detail. We've thrashed it through. We've deviated, but it was a very good deviation. And I think people would understand that Africa is a difficult thing. We talked about the animals. We had an encounter with a group of soldiers. That's just a little thing, set up audio settings. Can you still hear me, Koos?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, then we
keep
carry
talking.
on. We were the only company at Oshibelu training these guys. And the one morning there was a Bambu delegation that the lions are eating their cattle. Now what happened? The elephants in the dry season breaks the fence for water, because there were water holes that were established by the Department of Water Affairs of then Southwest Africa. And obviously lions follow. It's easier to catch cattle than that. And they set a trap. And we went there, and the guy said to us, but just around the corner, the lions are. And my 2RC was a major. And I said to him, Bucks, let's go. Let's go and get these lions. We're on a lion hunt. And our R1 rifles was on automatic, and we were ready, and we started walking, and this Wambu guy just at the back. After about 10 meters, he picked up a sock. Then another sock, then a shoe, then another shoe, then a comb, and then a jacket. And then he said, the tracks are dead. And then I realized he took us for a wild goose chase. The lions were there. We could see the tracks, but they fled. Then I said to him, listen, just call us. And then they took out a trap that you normally use for jackal. And they put this trap, fenced it around with thorn bushes. And we knew about this trap. And the next morning, we had ambush exercises in the area. And we were coming with a Willis Jeep into the ambush area to go and check the positions. We saw these two lions running right up to us. I got out and we shot the one lion. The other one got away. And lucky for us that we shot him, because only on his two front nails, this trap got hold of him and he couldn't release the trap. And after that, we had decent traps, and we had to cull the other 3 lions. Obviously, we reported this wasn't a undercover story, and we got the skins, have them tanned, and I distributed them to other people. And you know, that's the last time that I hunted. It wasn't nice to me to kill the lions. It wasn't nice, but it's difficult. And we were talking about animals, elephants. Hey, yeah, but especially in winter time, you had the problem in the Ochabello area. But with this story, I think we finished regarding the staff officer situation. Very well deviated by us.
Yeah, well, I think it was interesting. And we'll carry on. But let me first say to all of you, if you want to come and speak to us, you're always welcome. Everyone is important. You don't need to be a general officer. As long as you served and you have a story to tell, please contact me. Until we meet again, God bless.
Thank you, Chris.